Welcome, everybody, to episode 66 of UnHacked. We're here to help business owners navigate the chaos. We were just talking about chaos, but we're talking about chaos of cyber threats, cybersecurity, bad guys, Russian spies, Russian hackers, all that kind of stuff, with the hope of having all of us come out stronger, smarter, and more secure. And I will say, for my part, having been doing this podcast for well over a year now, I know a whole lot more than I did when I started. Anybody else feel that way?
I agree.
100%.
Lordy, I used to think I knew stuff, and then we started interviewing people like Grant McCracken, who we have on here today. So let's do some introductions. I'm Justin Shelley, CEO of Phoenix IT Advisors. And in my company, we help people use technology to build wealth with their business and then protect that wealth from, again, the Russian hackers. Mario will have something to say about that. The government fines and penalties and class action lawsuits, because everything else isn't enough. Now we got to worry about the attorneys in the court system. So it's ugly out there, guys, and we're here to help you navigate and fight back. Bryan, tell everybody who you are, what you do, and who you do it for.
Excellent. Like Justin, I also help business owners. My name is Bryan Lachapelle, CEO of B4 Networks. We're based in Niagara, Ontario, and we help business owners across Niagara and Simcoe eliminate the frustrations that come with dealing with technology while keeping them secure. Our mission is very simple. We make IT a growth driver and not a roadblock.
Ooh, I like it. Mario, what do you got for us?
Mario Zaki, CEO of Mastech IT, located in New Jersey. Been around for about 21 years now. We help small to medium-sized businesses stay safe online from those Russian hackers, the Chinese, and all the other countries that Justin refused on touching. But we specialize in keeping business owners have the ability to sleep better at night, knowing that their companies are going to be safe the next day when they come into work.
All right, Mario, you've been around for 21 years. I guess you're old enough to drink finally.
I am. I just turned legal.
Good to know. Good to know.
Amazing.
I'm almost twice your age. All right, and I called no bullshit earlier, but then here I can't shut it down today. I am thrilled to introduce our guest today, Grant McCracken. Grant is the founder of Dark Horse Security, where he's making cybersecurity accessible and affordable for organizations of all sizes and budgets. So that includes, the little guys like us. 13 plus years in cybersecurity as an ethical hacker, and I hope we get to some of those stories. So, Grant, thank you for being here, and tell everybody a little bit about yourself, what you do, and who you do it for.
Sure. So name's Grant, and first off, thank you for having me.
You bet.
So, like you said, right now, founder of Dark Horse Security. You already kind of covered the main points, right? Our goal with Dark Horse Security is to make cybersecurity particularly proactive security. So like penetration testing, vulnerability disclosure programs, bug bounty programs, things of that nature, vulnerability assessments. Making those more accessible and more affordable for organizations of all sizes and budgets. I used to be the VP of Ops at a company called Bugcrowd, where we ran bug bounties, pen tests, stuff like that. And after I left that organization, I was like, okay, like how could I kind of give back a little? And the idea that sort of bubbled up time and time again was that making those same solutions a little bit more affordable, because they're pretty expensive if you use like one of the main vendors in the space, Bugcrowd, HackerOne, so on and so forth. And so and I've just seen the power of bug bounty and crowdsourced security time and time again over my decade I spent at that company. And so I wanted to make that accessible to as like you said, like the little guys, like SMBs that could stand to benefit from it, but they're currently priced out, or it's too complex or too onerous or something to that effect. So I'll stop rambling. Hopefully that's helpful.
Now, Grant, do you work directly with like managed service providers, or do you work directly with end users, or a mixture of both?
Yeah, I'd love to work more with MSPs or MSSPs. Right now, not currently doing that, but would love to do that. Currently, it's just working directly with organizations. So like they'll come to us and say, we want to run a bug bounty, or we want a pen test, or whatever it is, and we kind of help them from there.
All right, so Grant, I've got to slow this down just a little bit, because we are starting to get technical and nerdy, and we have a habit of doing that. But we are talking to business owners who probably have no damn idea what a bug bounty is or a pen test. So let's just for a second get some definitions out of the way and talk a little bit about what that is.
Sure. Do one of you guys want to go, or you want me to swing at it? I don't
You
want to.
go,
Go ahead.
Bug. You
Bogart.
go.
You're our guest.
You go, and then we'll pick it apart. How's that sound?
Because we have no idea what it is.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
bug
All right.
bounties for me is just paying somebody to get rid of the spiders and bugs in my house.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, you're talking about your you had some name for them.
Japanese
some ladybug,
beetles.
some
Yeah,
Japanese beetles.
mutant ladybugs.
Mutant ladybugs. There we go. Yeah. So, what's a bug bounty, right? So, as an organization, you've potentially got attack surface. Say you're a SaaS B2B business or B2C business. So you have a web application or something to that effect, or actually we'll just use like Google or Facebook, right? So you've got this giant attack surface out there and you potentially run pen tests. So annually, quarterly, whatever cadence you potentially run a pen test on, usually done for compliance purposes or sometimes for risk reduction purposes. A pen test is short for penetration test, where you have a qualified security engineer follow a prescribed methodology to identify security vulnerabilities against your specific scope. So potentially you will just kind of use Google as the example here, right? You potentially have like a pen tester go test Gmail, and they test for different security vulnerabilities and so on and so forth. The problem with that is that it's point in time. So if you continually release new features, those features aren't necessarily tested at the time that they're released. Again, if you just do it once a year, there's a whole 11 months. They're time box usually, so they're going to test for a week, 2 weeks, a month, however long. They're still not going to test forever. You're limited by their set of experiences, their skill set, so on and so forth. Anyways, so you say, okay, I want to get a little more proactive with my security. Now, obviously, you should start with an assessment or a pen test or things like that. But then you say, okay, if anybody can find a vulnerability in my systems, I'll give them money, and that's a bug bounty. So then you define rewards, and you say, okay, so if you're able to find and you say, okay, like a critical vulnerability is, and I'm not trying to get too technical, but we'll say like code execution or SQL injection or something like that, right? So like that's a critical vulnerability because you could potentially do a lot of really bad things with that. Then you say, less critical vulnerabilities, this other thing, and so on and so forth. And you have like, usually it's like P0 through 5, where like a P5 is informational, a P3 is like medium, and P0 is like everything's on fire right now. And so you say, okay, based on these things, if you submit a vulnerability that matches one of these layers, we'll pay you a certain amount of money. So for instance, I believe if you, and the numbers vary, right, depending on, their team will look at it, but I think you can earn $250,000. I saw somebody the other day made like $250,000 for like a sandbox escape on Chrome, right? So like Google again has like giant attack surface, and if you're able to identify security vulnerabilities in different pieces of that attack surface, they'll pay you a certain amount of money for it. Same concept applies for anybody launching a bug bounty. Say for instance, again, B2B SaaS, you just say, okay, if you're able to identify, you probably have smaller rewards, and you say if you're able to identify a security vulnerability, we'll pay you a certain amount of money. The advantages of this is, one, it's continuous. Two, you only pay if somebody finds something, right? So you could set up a bug bounty, and if nobody finds anything, you're not paying them any money. So you're only paying for results. So that's super cost efficient. And then you get the benefit of like a bunch of different skill sets. Looking at your application in different and unique ways. And fundamentally, I run probably, this might sound ostentatious, but I've probably run and managed more bug bounty programs than anybody on the planet. And in general, almost every single program ends up providing significantly more value than if you just ran like a pen test. Now, I'm not saying don't run a pen test, but like you almost always find something super unique and incredible that's kind of a function of using the crowd. And again, I'm gonna stop talking shortly, but like if you have a pen test with one person, you're able to find a certain amount of vulnerabilities. Say you use 5 people, are you going to find more? Probably. Say you use 50 people, you're probably going to find more. 500, even more, right? And that's the power of bug bounties and what they bring to bear. So I will stop, and hopefully that was useful.
All I can think, Grant, is like week after week we sit here, we talk about how we can get out of this category of the low-hanging fruit, and we want the hackers to not know we're here and go away. And basically what you're saying is, screw that, paint the target right square on your back, and then stand up on a, on the, over the freeway and show it, like, come get me, right? Is that what you roll out the red carpet and just say, hey guys, come get me? Kind of.
The reality is, so a lot of people, especially legal teams, tend to have aversion to this, right? Because they have exactly that. They're like, wait a minute, we want people to hack us, but the short answer is the bad guys are doing it anyways. Like,
right,
you're not like, the bad guys aren't like, oh, they're running a bug bounty, I guess we'll go attack them now, right? They're already like looking for those vulnerabilities actively, and they're exploiting them. So all you're doing is leveling the playing field.
Okay.
So, and again, I'm also not saying that everybody needs to run a bug bounty, because some organizations aren't ready for it, right? Because you will get a lot of attention. And sometimes you got to handle that low hanging fruit first before you kind of go expose yourself to everybody identifying vulnerabilities, because sometimes there's just going to be a lot of noise. But when you get to the point where you as an organization are looking to reduce your risk in a meaningful way, especially in terms of like externally facing vulnerabilities, there's no more effective tool, at least in my view. And of course I'm biased, but there's no more effective tool than bug bounties to just identify vulnerabilities at scale.
Mario, Bryan, thoughts?
Yeah. Go ahead, Mario.
So you said external vulnerabilities. Now, how does somebody, like, when they're bringing on a team like yours, do they just say do external, or do they give you access to internal tools? And then how do they know that this is going to be then the information that they use, or that the credentials use will then be disclosed afterwards?
Sure. So to answer the first part of that, is it internal or external? The vast majority of things are external, right? So again, you're going to have like a exposed web app or stuff like that. You do have cases where organizations sometimes will drop you onto an internal network. They'll stick or we'll stick like a VM on their device, and then we'll allow hackers to have access to it via like a VM or not a VPN or something to that effect. In those cases, what we'll do, especially in like more sensitive context, so there are multiple ways to run a bug bounty, and I think that's also something worth being aware of, is that you don't just have to run a bug bounty to the whole world, come attack me, come and get it. You can also, by using a platform such as Dark Horse or HackerOne or BugCrowd, you can have a much smaller, more targeted bug bounty program. So you can potentially invite 5 people, 10 people, 15 people. And when we do that, right, when somebody comes to me and they say, hey, I'd like to run a private bug bounty program, and I want it to, I want to make sure that we're using people that we like really trust, because like these credentials are super sensitive. They're going to have access to systems that, are privileged or whatever. What we'll do is we'll use background checked testers that we have like a high degree of trust, right? So we have like a trust scoring system where, there's people that you trust more because you work with them, and because you work with them more than other people. And obviously you can move up in that trust hierarchy, but that's how we would typically mitigate for situations for where we need to have an improved degree of trust. Does that answer that question?
Yeah.
Grant,
Thank you.
I'm curious to ask, the majority of us are dealing with small, medium-sized businesses, anywhere from 10, 100 employees. What would be a type of business that would want to have a bug bounty in those cases, right? Small, medium-sized businesses, maybe they don't have a SaaS application that is developed and they're exposing the internet, but maybe they have something else. Do you have clients that are small, medium-sized businesses that sort of have something exposed to the public that they want a bug bounty on, but that isn't your traditional SaaS application, like an ERP or something like that?
Yeah, sure. There's no right. So when, I think the first part of the question was, when is it like potentially a good time, or like what would be kind of the use case? Like, the use case in my mind is if you want to reduce your risk, right? So when you get, so, and again, it's the number of organizations kind of, or the size of the organization varies a lot. Like sometimes you have really forward thinking, like 5-person organizations, and they're like, we're going to run a bug bounty. And then you have hundreds of people at an organization, and they're nowhere close to the same security maturity. So it really varies, but you get, or we get organizations that are fairly small that may not have as much attack surface, but they just say, we want to know what's out there. So we say, okay, anything that belongs to our organization, if you can find it on the internet, if you can prove that it belongs to us and you're able to find a security vulnerability, we want to know about that. And so you can run a bug bounty on literally anything. For instance, there have been companies that have run bug bounties on like LLMs, right? So like, and you can construct this in any way that you want. For instance, say you want to identify bias in an LLM, you could run a bug bounty on that, right? So now, it's not necessarily like a SaaS application or anything like that. It's an LLM that you're throwing different things at to identify bias. And
I'm going to pause you again, and let's do some definitions. So I think by now everybody knows what AI is. Maybe they know LLM. Maybe not, but just in case, LLM means what?
Large language model.
Okay, so it's the engine behind the AI that we're all talking about. All right.
ChatGPT, things like that.
Yeah. Attack surface. You've mentioned attack surface several times. I'm going to punt this one to Mario because you look too comfortable and quiet. Mario, what is an attack surface?
It is the front end of of the platform that the end user will see, that they can, that the outside world can see.
Okay.
Is that right?
I don't know, Brian. What do you think about that definition? You got anything to add to that?
I mean, it's like, from a very short and sweet. Yep, that's pretty much it. It's anything that the public has access to that you are exposing your internal systems and or, for example, a website is an attack surface, right? Anything that's on a website is by definition an attack surface because it's publicly exposed to everybody out there. If you have a VPN, the VPN connection itself could be an attack surface. Even though they're not yet in there, they can potentially get in via a VPN if people know it's there. For example, in the past, you used to go to remote.yourdomainname.com, and small business server would allow you to remote in that way. That would have been an attack surface, right? So anything that the public can gain access to, regardless of how they gain access to it, is considered an attack surface. Okay,
and where the bad guys can get in, right? The more complex your system is, probably the more attack surfaces you have. So, if I'm a handyman and I don't even have a website and I just go out and I build decks for people, I probably don't have much of an attack surface.
Well, I'll give you another example of an attack surface. Your Wi-Fi in your office is an attack surface. It's publicly exposed.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
you walk inside somebody's building, you see their Wi-Fi connection, you can try to hack it. That is a publicly exposed attack surface.
Right. Okay.
And
all right,
a really fun addition to attack surface, not to just because I was doing stuff with the NIST Cybersecurity Framework earlier, your supply chain is part of your attack surface. That is a monster piece that like a lot of people forget about. And like, yeah, sorry, 100%. I'll just put that out there.
Which we don't have a ton of control over. Some, but and that's a whole different episode we need to get into. Okay, so you mentioned frameworks. I want to talk about NIST in particular. Is this something that falls under NIST, bug bounties?
Good question. Not explicitly. I believe in the NIST cybersecurity framework, you've got like the identify and protect categories.
Right.
Like technically in there, it's like identify security vulnerabilities. So this could meet one of those. There is something else that we do called the vulnerability disclosure program that is expressly part of the NIST CSF that talks about, and again, when I say CSF, I'm talking about cybersecurity framework, and NIST being the National Institute of Standards and Technology. There is a point in there that says you need to have a way to receive vulnerability reports. And so that's what a vulnerability disclosure program is for. And a vulnerability disclosure program can be as simple as like, if you found a vulnerability, email security at our company. But we also make it easier for organizations to do that via platform. But long story short, it can satisfy some of the CSF requirements, but it's not expressly part of it.
So if you're going minimal compliance, you're probably not doing this. But if you're just checking boxes, probably this isn't where you're going. But if you really want to be safe and know what's out there and know your blind spots, right? That's really what this is about, is knowing your blind spots. Correct, Bryan?
Yeah.
I was going to say. I was going to ask.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask a question, and you can answer the one you have now first, if you so choose. It is. We have a lot of small businesses. I talked about that before. How does a business know that they would need a bug bounty? Like, what kind of software, what kind of exposure, what kind of attack surface the average doctor, lawyer, accountant, manufacturer would run into that they could self-identify and say, oh, maybe I need a bug bounty. Maybe I need to do this.
Yeah. So to answer that question, that's a good question. Like, where's that line? I'm not totally sure. I think it's gonna vary, because again, ostensibly you could have a bug bounty program no matter how small you are. You could run a bug bounty program on yourself, right? You could be like, hey, are you able to like hack my personal emails or something like that, right? So like you could get super small with your scope. Realistically, if I was to put like a line, I'd say at the point where you have your own in-house built sort of whether it be like an application or something to that effect, if you're just using like off-the-shelf software, generally that stuff, well, first off, like if there's a vulnerability in Salesforce, that's not really, I mean, it is your problem if it gets exploited, but like that's not yours to fix.
Nothing you can do about it.
Exactly. But like there also is, configuration issues, right? We see all the time people misconfigure like S3 buckets or stuff like that. So there are definitely, ways that you could set up infrastructure and these sort of off-the-shelf solutions in ways that are vulnerable. But my general benchmark for organizations would be if you have something that's kind of custom built, that's externally facing, you probably want to run a bug bounty on that to try to make sure that you're doing maximal risk reduction.
Does that include like brute force attacks? Trying to crack passwords and stuff like that?
It can. So when you set up a bug bounty, you're able to define the scope. So, or the, what you want people to test. For instance, things like DDoS are usually going to be out of scope, right? Because, that's not really, I don't know. It's not really something, I mean, you can like kind of fix it, but if you're a small organization, you're not super concerned about like DDoS vulnerabilities. And at a large enough scale, right, with a billion, different devices attack you at the same time, you're going to go down one way or the other.
You can do about it, yeah.
Exactly. So, that's one. You probably don't want attackers, and again, sometimes this is part of the scope, but you generally don't want people doing cred stuffing attacks or stuff like that, because you'll usually have some sort of lockout mechanism. It can be very noisy for your users. So if they're trying to gain access and then they get locked out after 5 attempts, then you're screwing everybody downstream. You generally don't want people to mess with your contact form. You want them to limit their automation. You generally want them to test with some kind of rate limiting, things like that. So you can set up parameters by which to make the testing less invasive, if that makes sense.
Do you guys ever find honeypots?
Okay. Ooh, I'm not sure. Short answer, yes. Right. Right. So if an organ, but like, it's not super often that like organizations actually set up honeypots, at least within like this context, right? You have to be a pretty mature security organization to be like, oh yeah, and then we're going to set up some fake stuff. So it's absolutely possible. Sometimes they'll disclose that in advance. They'll be like, hey, if you get to this certain, if you're getting this response from this endpoint, like disregard. Because one of the things that happens over the course of running a bug bounty program is that it's a very iterative process, right? Where you don't, because if what would happen is if there's a relatively easy to find honeypot and everybody finds that same honeypot and then they're all hitting it, and then everybody thinks it's a valid issue, and so they submit a report, and so you have to process all those reports, and so you don't, you paradoxically you don't really want like hundreds of reports over the exact same thing time and time again. So
and you're probably going to pay them for finding the honeypot.
Well, and that becomes a whole different conversation, because on average, organizations are like, we don't want to pay for that because, it's not an actual vulnerability. And so then you have to have like a nuanced conversation with the hackers or researchers, however you want to refer to them, to be like, hey, this is actually, something we put out there, and sorry, we'll notate it on the program summary to make sure that nobody submits it in the future. Here's $20 as like we're sorry, or something like that. So
okay, you brought up numbers
that can potentially play out.
Let's go pricing. So I'm a small business.
Oh, no.
Let's say I'm running an assessment for a company, so I'm going to use them. I'll redact all their information, but they fall under CMMC, so or NIST 171, whatever you want to call it, right? Just did their full assessment. What company of 15 employees, and let's just say they want to go proactive and they want to set this up. In that situation, what kind of a program should they set up, and what would it cost?
So I'm going to be a little biased here, right? So with Dark Horse, we're trying to democratize access to these solutions. So if they wanted to set up a bug bounty today, they could do it for free on Dark Horse. So on Dark Horse, what we have is a model where we don't charge for the first 25 reports, and then we charge per report after that. And it's a fairly small number. It's like $9 a report or something to that effect. So same goes for vulnerability disclosure programs, where it's free to set it up, and we don't start charging till you get beyond 25. So so you could set it up today and be off to the races. Now, where you're potentially going to end up paying money even before those 25 are up is on the rewards. So you set up your rewards and you say, okay, so I'm going to pay. And if you're a small organization, right, so it's going to vary, but our general strategy is like crawl, walk, run. So we say, okay, let's start with small numbers. We don't know what we don't know. So and we have a P0 through P5 sort of methodology. So we say, okay, so for we won't pay for P5s, and for P4s, we'll give like a very small amount of dollars, right? We'll give like $50, and then we'll give like 150 for a P4. Anyway, so all the way up to, we'll say like 500 for a P1. Now, again, this is very small. These are very small numbers. Again, if you're a larger organization, more robust security posture, you're going to be paying a lot more in rewards. Again, you see stuff as high as $250,000 for critical vulnerabilities that are very complex. So yeah, you'd probably, that would be the main source of costs, at least initially, for a smaller organization. Now, once you get beyond those 25, say you get 100 reports over a year, $9 a report, you're looking at $900 in platform fees, and then whatever you're paying in rewards. And then we do have to take like a small percentage of the rewards to be able to pay for, we do OFAC checks, make sure you're not paying like people in North Korea or Iran or Sudan, stuff like that. And then currency conversion, again, also costs money, and so on and so forth. So that's the short of it. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I mean, you said it's affordable. It's within reach of small businesses, and I just wanted to make sure that was true. And I definitely see that as a possibility. Bryan and Mario, Mario, you look like you have a burning question over there.
No, I'm just taking notes.
Oh. All right.
And just for reference, right, it's significantly more expensive through other solutions, just so we're clear, right? The average contract value at according to vendor.com for like HackerOne or Bugcrowd is like $40,000-ish, but you can have 6-figure contracts, slightly smaller contracts, stuff like that.
So how can you do this so much cheaper?
Well, one, I'm not making any money off of it, so I guess that's probably the like I care about these again. I think that these are really novel solutions that I think everybody should have access to. So that's the first thing. Two,
Okay.
it's software, so it just scales infinitely. It doesn't really cost a ton of money to keep running. It's just a platform that receives vulnerabilities. They process the vulnerabilities. They pay the vulnerabilities. Again, all those costs are kind of self-contained. I don't have a board or investors to satisfy. So that's again just what I've built for the reasons I built it. So I think that generally covers it. With pen testing, it's a little bit different. We do have some margin there, but with bug bounties and vuln disclosure programs, we're not really trying to make a bunch of money.
So you're making your money somewhere else because you're not a philanthropist. Or are you? Maybe you are. You're independently wealthy and okay. You at least have enough money to buy a computer so you could be here today.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not making a bunch of money off this. Yeah, pen testing we have margin, and so that's where we kind of make our bread and butter. I don't know if that's the right term, where we make our bread and butter. We don't make bread and butter, but like that's our bread and butter as far as like where revenue comes from. And yeah, for lack of a better term, the bug bounty and VDP side of the house is philanthropic, for lack of better.
Okay, hey, fair enough. Listen, I've got my passionate projects as well that I don't make money on. So, okay, good stuff. I mean, listen, when you and I first talked, I'm not going to say I didn't know what a bug bounty was. I do. This is not a new concept. They've been around for a while, but I will tell you, it wasn't really on my radar. It's not and this is why I quizzed you before, because it's not specifically laid out in any of the frameworks. Maybe not. Maybe it's somewhere, but like I said, I just went through 110 questions on CMMC level 2. It's not in there, unless you want to interpret, like you said. So it's a really interesting subject for me, because my number one goal in the world of security is to know my blind spots. And by definition, we don't. So we constantly have to be looking for them and shining that flashlight in places where we don't think we're going to find stuff. So that said, my burning question is, when you go out and you do, or I mean, you offer the reward and somebody else is doing this, what's the most outrageous thing you found, or what's the most common thing you find, or your hackers find? Because I will call them hackers. I love that term. It's the title of our show. What's out there? What are these blind spots that we don't really think about until somebody comes in and shows them to us?
It's not directly on the nose, but I'll run with this. The story that first comes to mind here is was working with a bank, and they wanted a bug bounty, and because somebody heard this was like an interesting thing to do, and so they come in and they set up a bug bounty, but they're just like, we just want to test like our crown jewels, right? What's super important. And so they end up setting the scope up as like this login form to like their main banking site, right? So like if you think about a bank and like you just go to the login form, right, that's probably going to be pretty secure. Like it'd be very surprising to have SQL injection on that login form, or some vulnerability where you're able to like break their authentication or something to that effect. So
I mean, we hope it's secure.
They were pretty yeah, right. And so I mean, you would the number of times I've seen like tick and 1 = 1 work for SQL injection on different forms is actually terrifying.
Yeah.
Anyways, but they were insistent on just testing this one thing, and I was like, okay, well, like this is going to be super secure. Like, I think you've got a lot of attack surface that's like outside of this. I think we should be focusing there. And the analogy you always give is like, if you have like a vault for a front door for your house, right? somebody's, sure, nobody's getting in that front door, but like they're just going to go around the back and come in the doggy door, or they're going to come in through the window that you left open, or something
I think they
else,
dig
right?
a
Like, you have
tunnel
bunch
underneath the vault and then they blow a hole through the bottom, at least in most of the movies.
Yeah. There's a lot of different
Yeah.
ways to skin the proverbial cat.
Right.
Why you're skinning cats, I don't know, but like,
They're tasty. Oops.
sorry,
I better edit that out.
So
Too soon. Too soon.
So there's all this other extra attack surface anyway. So like, but so they go months, no vulnerabilities, and just have to keep repeating this message to them. Eventually, I get them to go with like a wildcard, which is like a star.domain.com, right? So like anything. So it's not even saying like anything that belongs to this company is in scope. It's just like just any subdomain of like the main domain for this organization, and overnight they got blown out of the water. Just tons of critical vulnerabilities, and it was, I mean, eye-opening for them, but it's just stuck in my memory as like, yeah, like I told you so. And of course, they burn through like 6 figures of rewards and then some, just again overnight by expanding that aperture. And so a lot of organizations, I think I'm coming around to answering the original question, which was like, what are people missing? And it's that exposure, right? It's if you have a very myopic lens on what you're kind of securing, you're potentially leaving a lot exposed. And so I think that's one of the things that Bug Bounty does extremely well, because pen tests have to be scoped, right? You have to scope your pen test otherwise, it's just going to be this. I mean, you can have like unscoped pen tests, but there's just going to be this wide ranging sort of situation. And it's not necessarily going to be super useful for like compliance and stuff like that. Usually it's a little more tightly scoped for that sort of stuff. But anyways, long story short, Bug Bounty is extremely good at finding things that like you wouldn't have thought about. And so that's kind of my story there. I don't know if that answers your question now that I've rambled way too long.
That's perfect. Like I said, this has thrown a new thing onto my radar. That's what I love about being on this show every week. And there's never a lack of opportunity to try to up our game in the world of cybersecurity. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up this week. Bryan, Mario, I need your final thoughts, though. Key takeaways, lessons learned. What would you like people to know if they only heard this part of the show? Mario, you go first.
Yeah, so I think once you've reached a certain level of maturity in your cybersecurity or your development, you need to bring in somebody to try to break what you've done. And they're doing it with help in mind. They're not, you rather, and like what we were saying before we started recording, is that it's going to happen no matter what. You might as well do it in a controlled environment.
Right. Okay, Bryan.
For me, I always like to bring everything back to a journey, right? And so Mario is spot on. You're going to start your journey by plugging the holes that you know of, going through different security best practices. And once you've implemented all the things you think are best practices, the things that are in the CIS controls and in the NIST controls, and you've put everything in place, at that point there, why not open it up to the ethical hackers out there to see if you have a vulnerability you don't know about? And for small businesses, where this would apply would be if you have any exposed web application. For example, if you're an accountant and you offer people a web login portal where they can submit their documentation and submit their records, right? That might be an attack surface that you would want somebody to test through a bounty program like this. So any application, web application that you expose to the internet, if you're a small business, go through your due diligence, go through the journey, and then once you feel like you're in a position where you've done everything you can, why not? If you've got nothing, you will pay next to nothing, but if you have something, at least you know about it.
Yeah, find those blind spots. All right. Grant, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. If somebody listening today decides they do, in fact, want to run a bug bounty, where do they find you? And just give your contact information. How do you want people to reach out?
Sure. Yeah. So my home address is
Oh, listen, we already know that. We looked that up before we got on here.
We doxed you ages ago.
It's probably out there. Yeah. Name is Grant McCracken. Obviously, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's one of the easiest ways to find me. So if you type like Grant McCracken, Dark Horse, you'll probably find me, or Grant McCracken Security. You'll find me. If you connect, maybe mention something about the podcast or something to that effect, because there's a bunch of connection requests from people that I don't know, that I don't.
They're trying to sell you something or hack you.
or yeah. And then you could also reach out to Grant at darkhorse.sh. And then obviously our website is darkhorse.sh. You can go through any of the contact channels there, but any one of those will eventually route you to Dark Horse, and probably me at some point. So yeah, hopefully that works.
Perfect.
Awesome last name, by the way. I love that last name. It's like McLovin, from what is that? From American? Not American Pie. It's
Super Bad.
Super Bad. Yeah. So I love that.
I'm not familiar with that reference. All right, well, guys, as always,
you've never seen Super Bad?
I'm not saying I haven't. I don't know if I have or not. It doesn't sound familiar, and I don't want to talk about this. Last week, I got embarrassed about D&D, and what else was it that I don't participate in? Listen, I grew up super religious, thinking that all this stuff was bad. I wasn't allowed. I was not exposed to much of this stuff. D&D was the devil. I couldn't do it. And was this movie rated R? Like, if we're going to go there, if you're going to press me, I can't watch R-rated movies, Mario. I was Mormon.
I don't know. It's at least PG-13.
I don't know. I missed on a
sure
lot.
That was R. It was.
I missed a lot of stuff. So thank you for bringing up past trauma. Anyways, guys, we're gonna wrap up. But if you're listening to this on your phone, just go to the long description on Spotify or Apple Podcast or whatever, and you'll see all the links. You can go to darkhorse.sh. You can find Brian's beautiful face and his link and his company, and Mario's as well. And then if you'd rather just type in a website, go to unhackmybusiness.com. There's the official debut of our new website for the show. Unhackmybusiness.com will have all the episodes, the show notes, the contact information, and all that stuff. So, guys, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. Mario, Brian, Grant, really thank you for being here, guys. We will see you next week. Take care.
Take care, guys.
Thanks for having me.